Lord knows we've been no stranger to natural disasters in Colorado over the last 5 years. This is obviously a human-caused incident, but the response was in keeping with what we've seen before. I think the local officials, the county officials, and the state officials were on this strongly. When you have an incident like this, it is in every sense unacceptable, and I think we share the anger that something like this could happen. But I think that said, our primary role now is, all right, that's behind us, and how are we going to move forward? How do we make sure that we are measuring the incidents of, or the consequences of this incident in an aggressive way, frequent measuring. Obviously, the EPA is doing water chemistry measurements. I want you to know that our State Department of Public Health and the Environment are also doing measurements. We are working in concert with the EPA. Certainly, we see that the river is returning to its pre-incident quality. The moment we are sure that that quality is safe for a variety of uses, we will make sure that we get that information to the sheriff. It's obviously his decision on when the river gets reopened, but we will get him in real time as we get new information literally every hour. We have declared this a state disaster, immediately frees up $500,000 to help mitigate a lot of the consequences of this incident. But I want to stress that we're beyond that. We are committed to working, the state is committed to working with the local community, the county commissioners, the city officials of Durango, and the people of the entire county, and down into New Mexico, to make sure that we take this as a catalyst. And we recognize we have not just hundreds, but many thousands of old mines. It was a primary part of the economy. There's a network of old mines across many of the mountain ranges of not just in Colorado, but across the Rocky Mountains in the West. And I think our goal here is to really focus on what we can do to make sure that those mines where we know that we have a serious problem, how can we accelerate the remediation and make sure something like this never happens again? We are in concert. I talked to the administrator of the EPA over the weekend. I talked to her staff a number of times, and they are equally committed. She is as unhappy and disappointed in this as anybody could be, and as firmly committed to making sure we resolve these issues in real time in the near future. I think that's the broad overview. Why don't I think probably be more fruitful to answer questions.
Are they now doing enough? What could they be doing better?
I think they've got boots on the ground. I think they are on a full court press, making sure that they are monitoring in every way that they can, that they are able to be an active partner. And I think it's very useful to make sure that we have two systems at this point where the incident is so fresh that we have two sets of data, right? Two different groups, different laboratories doing the measuring of the water chemistry, so that we can be absolutely sure that this river is getting back to its pre-existing states.
So the water quality is one thing, but what happens with all of this sludge that is left behind on the rocks, on the riverbanks? What happens to that? Is it left to flush out naturally? Is there a plan to clean it up?
Well, I think we need to examine that, and I think that's probably the wrong word. I would look at it as a veneer. The places we've looked at it, it's very thin. It's mostly just in places where you had eddies, where there's any kind of a current. It is just washed away down the river. It's mostly, as close as I can tell, oxides of iron, zinc, maybe manganese, some of these heavy metals that are commonly, they wash off the rocky, the cliff faces with or without mining. So we've always had issues with metals in our streams and rivers in Colorado. The mining obviously exaggerated that dramatically, concentrated those offlows. What we saw in an incident like this is that you get a giant spike. At least based on the pH, the data that they just showed me this morning, it looks like that spike lasted about 8 hours. We don't have all the data in from the water chemistry to make sure that the heavy metals mirrored that spike, but they're doing those analyses as rapidly as they can.
What about making this a Superfund site? Will you push for that? Is it time for that?
I think we're going to look at everything, and I think everything's on the table to say, what are the pluses and the minuses of a Superfund site. There are other Superfund sites. How do we determine that? Obviously, a local community has to have a loud voice in that. Colorado is a state that manages itself to a large extent by the state working in partnership with their local community. So, but we'll certainly have those conversations. You can be guaranteed of that.
Can you be specific about what the preliminary results show? Bottom line, this is the water city.
So yes, the question was, what do the preliminary results show, and can we be sure that how do we know the public is safe? The preliminary results during the spike was we obviously had very high. The water was much more acidic than usual. Had high levels of heavy metals, and which we know are not good. We have looked at, and Pat, tell me her name again, Mike. Pat Dorsey. I'm so useless with names. Even I've got too many facts in my head. Pat Dorsey, who works out at the hatchery, and actually runs the hatchery, but she, before the surge ever came through, she put down groupings of 3 cages of fingerlings, small trout, in 3 different locations. So they basically were 108 fish between all these cages, and then they have been checking them every couple of hours throughout the surge and ever since then. And on the first day, one of the fish died, which is not uncommon when you move 108 fish around. But since then, every fish is still healthy to all appearances, and we went and looked at a bunch of them at 9 o'clock this morning, and they showed every indication of being healthy. We will obviously measure them for toxicology and see whether they took in heavy metals during the surge, but it doesn't appear that the fish, and we also there's a group here that whose name I just forgot as well, the Mountain Studies Institute. Who is an incredible resource, and I mean that sincerely. But they were looking at the invertebrates, so the insects, and especially benthic invertebrates, so the ones that are kind of crawling along the bottom of the river to check on their health and to be able to make sure we have sampling so that we can measure any toxins in that population as well. And again, there does not appear to be any die-off in the insects that the fish are used for nourishment. So that is great news. Does that mean we have all the answers? No, I don't think. We're still looking at and working with Colorado State University to see, all right, in terms of agriculture, are we ready to let this water be used again for irrigation? We want to make absolutely sure that there's not going to be heavy metal uptake into people's crops. Can we use the water for, when properly treated, for public consumption? We're not ready to make that decision yet, but we're getting close, and I think the indications are that the threat to human health is returning back to pre-event levels. If not already there now, it is getting there, and certainly very optimistic in the near future we can be able to reopen the river.
Governor, in your conversations with officials, in particular the Environmental Protection Agency, can you tell us what you told them and what they've told you?
I'm not sure everything that I said to them is fit for public consumption. So in deference to children, growing minds everywhere, I certainly expressed that I was disappointed that this happened in the manner, that there was a vacuum of information. But again, that's the past. I think certainly talking to the administrator, she was absolutely firm that this will never happen again, that they are going to take this as a wake-up call, that they will have protocols in place. Her response was everything I could have wanted in terms of being aggressive and firm and committed. She's, in my past experience with her, she is just as grounded, and what you see is what you get. And I expect that I'm sure she will come visit the site in the near future, and I'm sure that she will be equally emphatic with the community as she was with me, that this was not acceptable, and they're going to do everything humanly possible to make sure it never happens again.
What other resources does the state have to help not only Silverton, where the mine is located, but also Durango, La Plata County, the tribes, and everybody else downstream?
Well, again, this state, as in with any disaster, we are committed to making sure that resources are provided to the communities when they have suffered damage. We fully expect that the EPA will be our partner in this, and we're going to try and mitigate the damages. I was a small business person. I ran a restaurant for many years before I got into public life. And if the smaller your business, the more vulnerable you are to an interruption of business. Right now is the peak time, for instance, for rafters, for fishing guides. And I think that we are very sensitive to make sure that we do everything we can to help those businesses recover and get back. If we can't make them completely whole to what the revenues they would have had, we want to get them pretty darn close.
Governor, if this had been a private company, we'd probably see fines. If this had been a private company, you'd probably see fines and disciplinary action. We're dealing with the EPA. Residents want accountability. How do you give that to them?
Well, it would be obviously the EPA is not going to fine itself, right? They're the ones who administer these fines. The difference is the EPA is not trying to make a profit, right? And that's the reason. I think the assumption when there are fines is that a private business has gone above and beyond what the expected regulations are, what the law says, because they wanted to get additional profits. The fine is taking some of those profits away and making sure that people understand that if there's a problem, that their profit will be diminished. The EPA doesn't make a profit. So there's obviously was an error in judgment somewhere along the line. I'm not going to point the finger. I fully expect there will be a process of accountability. I haven't, it's not my job to tell the EPA how to discipline their staff or how they should work. But make no doubt, they understand the frustration and the anger that exists down here. Everyone's angry, right? I was angry. But going back and trying to, no one was benefiting. There was no profit made, no personal gain by this mistake, right? It was a mistake that was, again, I don't know the details of it, but it was a mistake that I think was made. I'm assuming it was made in best efforts. Now, if someone was, off taking a break or not paying attention, or if there was some level of malfeasance there, I think then the answer is very different. I think you will see very high levels of accountability. But I think it's our expectation. It's our expectation that the EPA will be transparent in that and be rigorous in how they look into what were the causes of the incident.
Is the state investigating that?
The state is not in. Again, we do not have jurisdiction over the federal government. You may wish that we did. You may wish that we did. We will certainly make sure. Again, I think the more important thing is to make sure that we figure out how to make sure this doesn't happen again, ever, right? Anywhere in the state, anywhere in the West.
Do we know anything more about the contracted company, the crew that was on site?
We know. I don't know. I think that's not my information to reveal. But the information I've seen has been minimal. Private contractor. I don't know who it is. I don't know who the people were involved. I just don't have that information.
So all anger aside, what can we do as a community to come together to clean it up, stop it, to stop the trickle?
Well, the trickle has stopped. My understanding is the trickle has stopped.
Has it been capped?
I believe they have force. Well, the capping is, I think, the problem.
Right.
We don't want to cap. What we want to do is make sure that the water that's coming through is treated and doesn't enter the water with these high levels of metals. So my understanding is that has occurred. It's in place, so there's no continuing addition to the pollution. I think the better question is, all these other mines, are there trickles coming through there, and how well or how quickly can we assess or reassess the conditions of those mines? Because we have assessments of every one of those mines. But in many cases, they could be 10 years old. So we are committed with the EPA to go back and look at and update all those assessments so we can make sure that those places where there might be a problem, we'll be able to address it before the problem becomes serious.
But is there anything we can do with our time, everybody here, to
We get on
put
the
our
banks and fluff the dirt up.
let's
I was talking to a friend yesterday who, and was saying that you will never, said, Governor, you will never be in another community that loves their river as much as this community does, right? And I'm sure I won't say who he is, but he does own a brew pub down here. So, and obviously, we would love to find some way where people can do something to help the river, to show, express that affection and that love for the river that is clearly runs so deeply through not just Durango, but the entire county. We'll certainly look at that. You have to be careful to make sure, A, that you're really mitigating and helping resolve a situation, and we also want to make sure we don't ever put people at risk. But I hear you. Certainly we will look at that.
Governor, can you give any more of a firm timetable in terms of when this will reopen? Are we talking days, weeks?
Well, probably reopen in stages. My guess is it'll reopen for, I don't know, rafting and fishing. My guess is that and this is conjecture, so maybe until we get toxicology, we may reopen it for fishing, but catch and release, just to make sure that we are absolutely safe, that we know exactly what the consequences are. It's probably too soon to give a firm estimate, but I think, like in a day, I was hoping that we would get that information. I wanted the information day before yesterday, but as soon as humanly possible. And I would, if we don't have that information, let's say 24 hours from now, at least be able to say, here's the reason why we're not opening. We have this blip in the data, but we're going as fast as we can. I mean, as a small business person, most of my life, I know what it's like to have your business sitting on the side of commerce when there's business waiting to be done.
In other words, if the water continues to test well, will you push for reopening before the 17th?
Well, again, this is a joint decision. So the sheriff, ultimately, he's the one who closed the river. He's the one who opens the river. I want to get, if there's positive information that scientifically would encourage him to reopen the river, I want to have that information in his hands the moment we have it. And by that I mean in minutes, not in hours, not in days, the moment we have it. Ultimately, I mean, that decision is made together. We advise, the sheriff will make that decision. I'm sure he'll make that decision in conjunction with the county commissioners and the mayor, and all the local officials.
Would you like to see the EPA apologize to this community? Do they owe them an apology for what they did?
Well, I think that the EPA has apologized. I think that there is a desire from conversations I've had that the apology wasn't sufficiently public, and
an apology from BP? No, we didn't.
Well, I think
In the private sector, this is a criminal matter.
but we're not in the no one was making a profit, and there's a difference between making a profit.
They make billions of dollars every year.
The EPA does.
That's right. Exactly.
It's not a question of getting away. It's a question of trying to make sure when someone makes a mistake that you resolve it, right? I get that there is a frustration that something like this ever happened. But people are not machines. They are not perfect, right? And there should be accountability. I don't for a moment disagree that we need to have some level of accountability on this. But let's find out exactly the details of what happened and who did what, and then see what the right response is.
Governor, the mining law of 1872 is antiquated, and I'm wondering what your administration is doing, considering what you stated in our headwaters in this state and in other western states and our rivers that are affected by mines. What are you doing to call on our legislators to make reform for the mining law so it's up to date with what we need today?
The question was the mining law of 1872 is just that. It's the mining law of 1872, and it is, I think, woefully out of date. We've discussed that before. There are strong opinions on a variety of improvements that could be done. I know that there is a strong movement to enact some Good Samaritan legislation that would allow individuals or companies that wanted to come in and help mitigate the condition of some of these mine tailings and mine adits to diminish their problem. That is something that's being discussed. and I personally think it's something worth pursuing, right? In other words, right now we have very high standards. If people can't bring it up to, and I'm not sure this is the right number, but 80%, 80% of level of getting the water back to 80% of purity, then you still are stuck with the liability. My question would be, well, in some cases where you can get it up to 50% improved, isn't that worth doing, right? Even if you can't get it exactly right this minute to where that high standard is, should we still be taking all these mines and doing what we can as effectively and efficiently as we can, as quickly as we can, to get maximum improvement? So that's the kind of legislation that I would certainly support. All right, 2 more questions, if there are.
Do you have an indication of how many other sites there are like this that the EPA is working on in Colorado, and what's their current status right now?
I don't have the exact number. I know there are a number of other sites that are being worked on. Well, I don't know do we have that? How many other EPA sites do we have? We don't have an exact number. It's not a huge number, but there are a number of places where they are actively working on cleaning up these conditions. We don't think that this should have any effect on well water. That would be very remote, hard to imagine. Let me just finish and just say that this is not only one of the most beautiful parts of Colorado, but one of the most beautiful parts of America. That Durango is open for business, that we're going to get, in the next few days is my full expectation that we will have, rafters, fishermen, everybody back in business. So we will not rest until we're able to get this river back to its pre-event condition and the economy back to where it was. More better. That's fair enough. As we said at every single, and I should finish with that every disaster this state's faced, in the end, we are committed to making sure that we're better after than we were before, and we will do that here.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Thank you.